In the very first episode of the Pokemon anime series, Ash Ketchum, our hero, used his Pokedex to get his very first entry of all time, a Pidgey. And in that same episode, Ash could not manage to capture one. It was something that eluded him. But I will not be having that same issue today, as Professor Oak will be catching one and be giving me that same Pidgey as my starter that I will be using from the beginning of this episode until the end of the Elite Four and the Champion battle. I am working my way through the Pokedex of using every single Pokemon available in Gen 1 in order to beat Pokemon Yellow. So far we have already looked at the 3 starters, we have looked at some bugs, but now it is time to look at another very common Pokemon that you find early game in both Red, Blue, and of course this game, Yellow. Here on this channel we have a lot of knowledge about Pidgey. We is an interesting thing to say there. This is a one-man channel. It's a solo channel, right? Just like the challenges that we're doing. So it's very interesting that I'm using the words we. This is why I probably should be using scripts whenever I do these. I ad-lib every single section, sometimes having to do it a couple times because I mess up or forget what has happened. But I like doing it off the cuff. It feels a little bit more personal, feels a little bit more like I'm in the moment, and sometimes I get to react to it genuinely in real time with you because I half the time forget what has happened the second that I hit stop on the recording. What I do not forget though is the Pokemon Pidgey. You see, every generation has some sort of early game bird type Pokemon, and they are not all built the same. Some of them are very great for the end game, some of them are not. Pidgey to me is in that category. However, today, at the very least in the beginning of the game, this Pidgey will be able to take out the rival, which is the first step in a 2-part plan that's going to be crucial for the endgame of this bird. Therefore, we needed this very first victory here in Professor Oak's lab, and then going over to Route 22 to fight the rival again before we get to Pewter City. We need to get this victory in because we want him to end up with Jolteon. Yes, I get it, Jolteon is electric. I hear you say it in the comments, but hold that thought for a second. Because remember, if he goes with Vaporeon or with Flareon, he will have a Magneton, and that is a much larger threat than Jolteon is. But either way, we get those 2 wins very quickly, in fact. 5 minutes is not necessarily the fastest time I think that we will ever see, obviously, but Pidgey, for what it's worth, and despite how bad it is as a Pokemon for this type of challenge and run, the intro or the beginning isn't that bad. Really, it's going to kind of wall off eventually. That's going to be the biggest issue. And a lot of that does come down to the move pool. So we are going to train against every single bug trainer here in Viridian Forest. And while we're fighting, I'm going to talk about that learn set because it is going to be the thing that the closer we get to the Elite Four, the more it's going to become a frustration. So looking at that learn set like we were just talking about, he has Gust and Sand Attack when we first got him. Then there is Quick Attack, which we've already learned. Whirlwind is a waste. It does not work in battle, at least not in Generation 1, so not helpful. Wing Attack will be good until we can get Fly, because that'll do double the damage. It does take double the time, but also helps you evade some things. So there are things that are going to have some pros and cons to using a move like Fly. Then Mirror Move, not a great move for us to use in a solo challenge. Just a lot of RNG there, a lot of things, and usually they're not using moves that are then super effective against themselves. So not really an ideal move. Razor Wind, no thanks. It takes 2 turns and it's not that accurate. Like I said, Whirlwind, obviously not helpful. We're not really going to Toxic Stall anything that just takes too much time. Takedown Double Edge could potentially be helpful. Rage is not good in Generation 1. Mimic is good, and I think I could use that in this run. I still haven't made up my mind. I'd kind of like to avoid using the same tactics over and over again, but when you really break it down and look at the attacks here, Swift might be the only other thing that is really of help to me in this run, just because of the fact that Agility will let us be able to set up some badge boosts in the end of the game, and I'll explain that a little bit later in the video when it becomes a little bit more relevant. But really looking at this learn set, as you can see, it's mostly normal and mostly flying moves, and we really don't have a lot of type coverage. So a move like Mimic in this type of situation does feel a little bit better because we need that coverage and because we need a little bit of help sometimes in order to move through other people's teams. And so, with all of that information and exposition out of the way, we have made our way through the Viridian Forest. I have defeated the first gym trainer and the only gym trainer at Brock's gym, and I forget to heal going into this fight, but honestly, I'm not worried because of a couple things. They can continue to hit me. Pidgey's defense is not terrible, at least at this stage of the game, but when you look at their learn set on the right-hand side here, currently, they have not yet learned anything that is super effective against me. They are super effective as rock Pokemon, right? But that move pool right now does not have anything like Rock Throw or Rock Slide. So we are all sort of dealing only normal type damage against one another. And so that is the biggest benefit to me in this fight at this point. At level 16 and less than 10 minutes in, we are already about halfway through the Onix, which is good. And Sand Attack is really going to be doing some heavy lifting here, not just by keeping us safe during the bide moments, but it keeps us from getting hit by things, even honestly Screech, but it's keeping things like Tackle and Bind from being able to hit us, which is one of the reasons why, when you look at this, Onix doesn't do anything to us. We get through with still more than half health, and we're fine. This is, for the Pokemon so far that we've seen, one of the least concerning fights, actually, pretty surprisingly. Sand Attack really is, at least in this moment, and for the first couple of minutes here, a huge benefit until we can start hitting a lot harder. And so we make our way to the very end of Mount Moon. I'm doing that thing where I'm not going to show every single fight. I'm going to sort of pick and choose throughout the series when I show which person. Sometimes it might be because something interesting happens. In this case, it's just to sort of show that we get here to the end, really no issues. Pidgey continues to sort of prove my point or my idea on the fact that it's great for early game and it's going to start slowing down. And it's going to get pretty drastic, actually, how much that hits us, I think. Even with it being a weaker first-level Pokemon, surprise, surprise to no one, really, Team Rocket Trio, no big deal. Now, what is somewhat a big deal at this point would be going up against the rival again. One of the biggest problems for Pidgey is not really having anything that's great against Sandshrew. Sandshrew can make a problem, as you can already see with accuracy debuffs. Luckily, he only uses one, so hopefully we are still going to be hitting fairly frequently enough. 66%, sometimes I really don't feel like it is 66, I think it gets crazier. And that drops us down to 50, but we finally get one less hit in at 6% health. Little too close for my comfort, but we make it. We go obviously through Bill, right? We're always going to kind of skip that section unless it gives us any difficulty. And now I'm going to take us to the Cerulean Gym. I'm showing most of the gym here because Pidgey isn't super effective against anybody, but right now they don't have any moves that are super effective against us. So it feels fairly well even at level 28 versus their 19 or so level. There's a lot to balance here. Pidgey's defense is there, but really its special is going to be a big problem. But for now, we do have the ability to two-hit the Staryu. Starmie clearly has a lot more defense, and using moves like Harden or X-Attack gives us some time. Luckily, because it wasn't hitting us every single time, we make through with only 12 HP left. We then move on to the Thief Rocket, the only one that I think we really ever actually see capable of doing anything. Obviously, they take over a tower later, but I think there's something about a single guy breaking in and stealing something that makes it kind of feel like he's the only one that's really done anything with his career. They should give him a promotion. Now, we are already, though, over to SS, and there's no issue between Cerulean and Vermilion. SSN is usually a great place to train if I want to, so I'm doing a little bit of a montage in a different way than I have in the past, just to sort of showcase me doing a lot of final hits against basically every team and every Pokemon that is on the SSN, leading up to the Rival 3 fight. One of the big tough things here, though, is that we are starting to see some of those cracks in the stats that we've talked about. Even at 59 for attack at this point in the game, I am 14 levels above Eevee, and I'm still not one-shotting. I'm not really sure we're going to see a lot of one-shots to begin with. There's not many moves that we have that are super effective against anyone, really, for the entirety of the video, but flying does sometimes, again, provide us some advantages. We do defeat the rival, not really that bad. We miss a lot of those sand attacks, so we're fine. And then we move on to Surge. Using Wing Attack first was not great. Quick Attack was the way to go, and look at that. Surge, bad. Don't know how he's a gym leader in this generation, or at least in this game. We move on to the Rock Tunnel. I'm not going to show every fight here either, but I do want to showcase that we're going to run into a lot of Pokemon who, kind of like the early game against Brock, will have the ability to really stall Pidgey. And while we're not necessarily going for an actual record or any kind of major speedrun thing, we're just going for our best, it is still something that takes us a long time. I'm going to showcase it a lot here against this Onix. It's going to be nearly a 2-digit hit to kill for this Onix, and that is not the kind of stats or moves, or lack thereof, that you want to see this late in the game. Now, speaking of this part of the game, let's look at the self-destructing hiker. Okay, this team is scary, and the fact that we're at 26 health, frightening. Sand Attack is really our only hope in this situation, and hope that self-destruct misses 3 times. It does not, but we do make it through with just a little bit of health. We are now going to go up against every single trainer between Lavender Town and Celadon. We're also going to stop and pick up Swift. This is something that I did not do before I started going through the route. And then I realized, Swift is a good move for us to have, once again, in the meantime, but something that never misses. So I'm going to use that to my advantage and just work our way down the line, down the road, hitting every single Pokemon that anyone could possibly throw out in front of my guy. We then go over at Celadon, we pick up Fly, we teach it, and then we go into the secret HQ in the casino. At this point, I'm starting here at the trio, but we fight every single person. I feel like I show the headquarters quite a lot, so I'm going to try and skip that section for this particular video. Again, just to sort of keep things fresh, and we're going to have something else to focus on later. So let's just sort of get through this section, right? I do a little bit of healing, and then I go up against Giovanni. This is the first time that we're going to get an opportunity to go up against Giovanni, and instantly we do have a problem. You see, one of the things we talked about earlier on with Brock was the fact that he just had things like Tackle. And yes, we have gone up against the self-destructing hiker, which wasn't really a problem, it was more of an obstacle. But you for sure start to see the issues here with Giovanni's team. Luckily, we were over-leveled, but starting to see Rock Throw on a team that is considerably stronger, cause for concern. This is a little bit of foreshadowing. Now, here's another bit of foreshadowing. I typically show the gym for Erica and just sort of show a little bit of a training montage. We don't even need to do that today because Pidgey, as a flying type, has the ability to just sweep this entire building. It's not even a challenge. We don't even break a sweat. I literally could use a potion, a regular potion, and get all my health back. Here's another thing that I have never shown at any point on these challenges yet. So I figured, why not show what I do to help bridge the gap between some of these areas, which is, of course, I go and I pick up a drink to give to the security guards so that I can finally cross through or into Saffron City. And it's also something that I typically just buy as many fresh waters as I can just by mashing the button for about a minute or so. And then because I have a bunch of money, I go pick up as many vitamins as I can use on Pidgey. Then we're going to make our way to Lavender Town. We crossed through here earlier, obviously, after Rock Tunnel. You always have to circle back now that you have the Sylph Scope. We go up against Rival 4. This actually weirdly was easier of a fight than the one before this. He has more and they are stronger, but I actually think because we went up against so many more people between these last two fights, I've actually leveled up even more by this point. So we are cruising right through. And the cool thing here is that I'm going to just sit here and show the Ghastly fights, right? Because one of the things that we've talked about before is the types of moves that cannot hit them, what they can attack, etc., etc. But usually I don't show these fights that much unless I maybe have Dig, that I might show one of the moves or one of the fights. Just recognizing the fact that it's kind of my only option. Really right now I only have one option as well, which is just flying moves in general. But the point here is that I am not speeding this up any more than just what the general 4 times speed gameplay is. But this is really more just a showcase that flying Pokemon are quite good, at least in Generation 1, for going up against all of the ghost Pokemon. There's only 3 of them, and of course they are also split type, which is why a move like Dig is very helpful. But at the end of the day, they can't hit us. They can't touch us with Pidgey. And so Pidgey is able to just sweep right through the entire tower, like it's no big deal. Pidgey is also at this point an hour in, and as you will see, there are 0 resets. That part is maybe the most surprising aspect of this run to me so far. The fact that we have frequently gone up against Pokemon that we for sure should not have, whether just because of our own choices or because people naturally have something that is stronger against you in that moment, etc., etc. We are not really playing with a Pokemon that is known for its strength, and I think a lot of that comes down to the way this game runs. But we make it through Ghost Tower, we get the Poke Flute, and now I'm going way out of order, right? I am going to showcase the next couple of things just in a way that I think visually makes a little bit more sense, so we're skipping way ahead. I've already at this point gone down to Fuchsia City, but I have, in the video, just jumped ahead to the Sylph Company area. I fought every single member of Team Rocket in this building. And the reason for that is very simple. I did not want what just happened to be the thing that happened. You see, sometimes Pokemon, especially Pokemon in their earlier stages, this is where the challenge really kind of kicks in. We're seeing fully evolved Pokemon, or at least second stage Pokemon, and we're still stuck on that first one. So that is a tough pill to swallow. I almost said tough cookie to crumble, which I guess is also fair. But we get very lucky here because in Gen 1, if you get poisoned, if you kill a Pokemon on that same turn, you do not take damage when someone sends out their next Pokemon. So therefore, with 4 health and a poison, boom, easy peasy. We're done. It's not really easy peasy, but it is done. And so we get to move on and we get to go fight the Rocket Trio. They are the last line of defense before Giovanni. And would you look at that? They are blasting off again. Therefore, up next is fighting a CEO, much like another Nintendo character would. So we get a little bit lucky here, though, with this fight, right? We've talked previously about what it means for a team like Giovanni's to grow, expand, become stronger. But in this case, the big thing that's happening here is he makes it easier for me. He got rid of all of his Pokemon that have a rock move, in this case, Onix, and so therefore we make it past Giovanni, no problem. Okay, going backwards again, we are going to look at some gym interactions, right? One of the big things here is Koga's gym might be the toughest one at this point in the game, or even until we get to the Elite Four. For Pidgey, I think the big thing here is just that the special is pretty low compared to other things, and a lot of the Pokemon and a lot of the moves that we go up against here are specifically special attackers. So that's a tough thing to deal with. It's weird to be in this gym and see a lot of people using psychic moves. I've said the joke in previous videos, but this is not really a poison gym at the end of the day. This gym truly turns into a psychic bug gym. And while psychic might be a problem for the low special, at the end of the day, we are flying type. So that's going to give us an advantage against these little bug guys. So we're starting off strong. He instantly lowers my special, which is exactly what we were just talking about. But in this fight with Koga, it turns out you set up a little bit, and the next thing you know, you're making a clean sweep through the Venonats, and Venomoth takes one extra hit, but it goes down, and so then we get to scoot forward to the Sabrina fight. The cool thing here is by now we've leveled up so much that Pidgey can just hit Swift, and because Alakazam does not do anything at all, we get through that fight unscathed. Not as unscathed, we are scooting forward to Blaine. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to scoot forward and just show you the attempt here that we get through on. We do have 2 resets added on because of Blaine, specifically one of them just being we actually don't even get past Ninetales, mostly because of Confuse Ray. But then we also get to Arcanine, who one-taps us with Fire Blast full health. But in this case, we get to the Arcanine, and while it feels like it is suddenly able to tank all of our hits just because it lowers our attack just once, undoing all of those badge boosts, we still have what it takes to get him down for the count. That is 7 badges. Now let's go ahead and jump immediately to the Viridian Gym. Now, between those 2 moments, there are some other things that we skip over here. One of the big ones being that I did finally cave and realize that we are at the section of the game where really Mimic is going to be the only thing that's really going to help pull us out of this. We're getting to attacks and maneuvers and team-ups and whatever that are going to just sort of brick wall this Pidgey. One of the biggest examples is honestly this gym with the typing and the types of moves they have, the type of defense that they have, or the strength rather of their defense. So we needed to pick up a great move like Mimic. So after a bunch of training and some rare candies and Mimic, we have picked up the ability to use Earthquake in this fight. Using the agility to set up on the badge boost was enough to tank a Rock Slide, otherwise it would have killed us. And we are able to move forward. Unfortunately for us, forward does mean going through Rival 6 and his team. Now, we're fortunate once again for a couple things. 2 of these Pokemon have still not evolved, and because we are flying, even if Sandslash did have Earthquake, we would be obviously able to withstand it because it would not affect us. We do have the ability and time to set up against him. We lose a lot of health, but we are going to start doing a fair amount more damage, and you'll see that this is why we needed a move like Mimic so that we could grab Slash from Sandslash. Pidgey's learn set and his move pool right now was not good enough to be able to get through this team, and certainly will not be able to get through the Elite Four without it. Therefore, this is the kind of run that we attach Mimic to. So we beat the rival, we go heal up, and now we're going to make our way to Indigo Plateau. And I was just talking about how crucial Mimic was going to be in order to fight the Elite Four, and that was definite foreshadowing. I said at the beginning of this episode that sometimes I forget what happens in some of these videos by the time I hit stop recording and come back to the footage. This was one where, boy howdy, do I remember every minute of this section. You see, we get a lot of resets. And a lot of that comes down to Lorelei's AI just really doesn't play the way that I feel like it should be. A lot of it is because I know that it sees super effective moves against me, but also typically if you hit her on the second turn, or even if you haven't yet, usually Dugong instantly goes for rest on the second turn. However, this is the fight that I've had with her where she consistently changes up how she plays. She sometimes goes for Bubble Beam. Okay, why? Most of the time she just goes for Aurora Beam, never going for rest at all. So I never have an opportunity to set up, and I need to do the setup because I will not get past Cloyster without setting up. There's a reason why Cloyster is on both her team and the rivals. Cloyster is really good. Unfortunately, so is Slowbro. So, okay, we've got a couple resets. No big deal. Sometimes you just have to get in there, hopefully get a couple good rolls, and then maybe you'll get to the Slowbro still with a fair amount of health, so that way you can copy the move that you need, which is Amnesia, another move that we'll use to do further setups and prevent getting knocked out by moves like Ice Punch and Blizzard at the end of this fight. But, you know, you kind of got to get there to be able to do that. So that's what we attempt. We just have to keep doing it. There's not really many opportunities or many places that I can go to at this point in order to train Pidgey up. At level 80, it's kind of just the Elite Four is really the fastest way of doing it. What I probably should be doing is blackout training in this section, but there's a little bit of stubbornness, as I've talked about in previous videos, and that stubbornness says, nah man, just go for it. You've got it. You're level 80. You are nearly 30 levels above some of these Pokemon, and some of the future ones you'll be at least 20 above, you know? But no. No. I just keep brute forcing it. And so we go from 3 resets all the way up to 17, as you can see here. This is a time jump that I don't care for, because look at the timer. We're now at 2 hours and 23, well, about to be 24 minutes. Oh my God. And let me tell you, man, I just, looking back at all of this footage, and thank goodness I cut some of it for myself, because I can feel the frustration even now. Looking back at all of this, I mean, I could not catch a break on any of these. I get frozen solid here. You know what I mean? It's just, if it's not being hit with Aurora Beam and it lowering my attack despite having used a stat boost, and then it undoing all my work and then having to reset, or getting frozen solid by Ice Beam, or just straight up dying because of, chip damage, and eventually something will take me out. The moves are still super effective. I don't just get that gone away because I've leveled up ridiculously. But here I have finally gotten to the Slowbro with a fair amount enough of health of 88. I'm still in the orange, so I'm able to grab that Amnesia. I'm able to set up just once, which I fear is really not enough per se, but in the end it actually is. I just needed a little extra oomph, and I get through this fight, I survive it, and we get to move on. Whew. Although we lost a lot of time to Lorelei, the good news is that even though he has Rock Slide on a couple Pokemon, and a Thunder Punch, and also an Ice Punch, oh god, okay, maybe this is a scarier fight than I remember it being, but either way, using things like Mimic, we have some options, and we have the ability to take on his team. Pidgey being this over-leveled should make it easier to go up against fighting Pokemon specifically. It's the rock types that really I have to be careful on because their defense is so high. Even with a strong attack, sometimes it might not be enough. But as you're going to see, we just need a fly to go up against Machamp, and Bruno is done. Next, we've got Agatha. Agatha can sometimes be a huge problem for other trainers or for other Pokemon. We do not have Dig today, but we do have Mimic. My thought process is to use Lick, just because that is super effective against other Ghost-type Pokemon. And then I can use all of my other types of moves against Golbat and Arbok. I can get at least 2 setups in here on this run. I then get my 3rd in against that original Gengar, which is a little bit of a risk just because any opportunity that it can get to hit me with even anything, Mega Drain does not do a lot, but Confuse Ray can really mess up my day. So I really desperately need to break Substitute and get attacks in before it can use any of these types of maneuvers. The biggest problem is, however, between Confuse Ray and all the little chip damage from earlier, I get to the final Gengar and I do faint to a Psychic. My special defense, once again, comes in at the opposite of clutch. So we run it back. We go up against Agatha again. This time we are once again picking up Lick, and I am hoping that that is going to be a decent enough move. They instantly go into Golbat, get knocked out, go back to the original Gengar. Luckily, because it breaks its own substitute out this late in the fight, it has basically no health, and so I am able to just take it down like it's nothing. We get slept, but of course we wake up instantly. This Pidgey is built differently. However, it is built differently in terms of the fact that while you won't see all of them, this Pidgey does end up hitting itself so many times in this run. But it doesn't matter because eventually we come into the last fight. We get a critical hit, which is important. We are confused. But even with getting hit and having a Psychic, we have just enough health to eke out a win against Agatha. And while Lorelei was really just a pain in the neck just because of how effective she is against Pidgey, at the end of the day, the biggest struggle that we're going to have here is just Pokemon whose strength is much higher. Lance could be a whole other type of obstacle, especially if he's going to be using health items in this way. There aren't a lot of opportunities to get a setup move in during really any of this fight. Something like the Dragonair could always use Thunder Wave and paralyze me, which then doesn't really help my speed, but it could help at least with getting some of these things off against something that is weaker than Gyarados. But with Gyarados, I also sometimes have the ability to set up because I am using them while he has the recharges. There's a lot of things to balance here. But as long as I can get through the very first 2 Pokemon, it means that we can use Mimic right here like we've discussed before. We've seen it already with Butterfree, and because I did get that setup in, I don't die to his Ice Beam. I take out Dragonair, I take out Aerodactyl, and I get to take out Dragonite. Okay, listen, I understand that some people might be very tired of the Mimic gimmick, but at the end of the day, it's kind of exciting when you use it with a Pokemon like Pidgey, because Pidgey really wouldn't be able to fight Pokemon of that size without something like that. And so to be able to see it use this massive power, oh man, I don't know, it just gets me excited. And therefore, we then get to go up against the champion. This is a moment where we have to really think about the move that we are taking. I've decided to go for Earthquake on this one. I don't think it's really going to be all that effective against anyone other than the final 2 Pokemon on his team, being Ninetales and Jolteon. But if I can get a good enough setup, I probably should be able to one-hit them anyway. My biggest fear is moves like that from Exeggutor, being able to stomp and barrage me out to death while I am asleep and cannot defend myself. Yeah, that's going to be a reset. Okay. So we're going to go back into this, and perhaps this time it's going to be a little bit different. Blue is also the type of AI where his moves are a little bit more balanced. You can't always guess as to where they're going to go. Sometimes he might heal at a time that he wouldn't normally heal, or vice versa, and you've sort of wasted a turn doing something going, oh, I've got a free moment here. Nope, you never do. He changes up his moves fairly frequently enough that I think that it keeps you on your toes and keeps you thinking that you've also maybe got to change up your maneuvers. As he has used Kinesis, that means that I have gained a little bit more attack power here, but it does mean that, of course, I am going to potentially miss a little bit more often, so we are going to have to really hope for the best on these final hits. As you can see, it's not going to be enough. Okay, Yeah, going into a game where you are solo Pokemon challenging yourself against a final team that has so much more coverage, it's really difficult. There's always at least one hang up in this fight. But I'm going to come into this one with a little bit of a different strategy. I am actually going to use Mimic on Alakazam, and I'm going to grab Recover. And then I'm going to try and do some stuff here with all of this, especially now that I have leveled up. Now is the time to do the badge boosts because they can't come off again at this point. And so I will boost all of my stats here, especially because even if he puts me to sleep, really all he can do is use Barrage, which doesn't do much. I use the Recover to get basically back to where we were, almost at full health here going into the Cloister, which is great. Because I've badge boosted, I can withstand the Aurora Beam. Okay, great. Pidgey is starting to put in some work. Getting that extra bit of health is exactly what we needed because at this point we would have been in the yellow or the red, and we beat this guy. Oh my god, Pidgey, you beautiful little bird. You cute, beautiful little bird, Pidgey. At first, I thought all you did was Sand Attack and Wing Attack. And look at you now. You're using Double Edge, you're using Mimic, you're using Fly, you're using Agility. A move that I don't think small child Colin ever used, but we clock in at 2 hours, 35 minutes at a whopping level 83. Whew, boy. Well, not exactly the best run, but Pidgey did what Pidgey had to do in order to finish the fight. Not necessarily a beautiful finish, not necessarily a beautiful run, but at the end of the day, the fact that you're using a Pokemon that is a very early stage run thing feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. So that's going to do it for Pidgey, and I will see you all next week for yet another Pokemon Solo Challenge.